We have some new interesting noises coming from the Democratic Party. This is really pretty significant, big write-up in the New York Times about whether or not Biden should run in 2024. Go ahead and throw this tear sheet up on the screen. So the headline here is, should Biden run in 2024? Democratic whispers of no start to rise. They say in interviews, dozens of frustrated Democratic officials, members of Congress, and voters express doubts about the president's ability to rescue his reeling party and take the fight to Republicans. And Saagar, they very gingerly in this article suggest that maybe Biden is not quite as with it as he once was. Okay, so I guess that taboo is now sort of going off the table now that it's manifestly clear to everyone. Listen, this is an old guy, you know. I mean, he's not where he was. Let me read you a couple of the quotes here because this again is extraordinary, especially coming from the New York Times, which is kind of like, you know, they're channeling the angst of elite Democrats here in Washington and in other key states. They have a Democratic National Committee member from Miami who said, to say our country was on the right track would flagrantly depart from reality. Mr. Biden should announce his intent not to seek re-election in 24 right after the midterms. So that's one. You've got another one here from a woman named Ann Hart. She's a Democratic Party co-chair in an important county in Iowa. She actually endorsed Biden in the 2020 caucuses. She introduced him at a campaign stop in her area. And she says she can't imagine how Biden manages the presidency at 79 years old. And she talks about how she's in her 60s and she can't even herself imagine handling that job. She says, I get asked to run for things. Are you kidding? I'm 64. We need youth. So I kind of admire him wanting to take this on. I hope he'll pass the torch. Democrats need fresh, bold leadership for the 2024 presidential race. She said, that can't be Biden. But the real attention grabber here was from former Barack Obama aide, David Axelrod. Go ahead and put this one up on the screen. This is pretty extraordinary stuff. He says the stark reality is the president would be closer to 90 than he would be to 80 at the end of a second term, and that would be a major issue. He goes on to say, and I thought this was, I don't know. He says Biden doesn't get the credit he deserves for steering the country through the worst of the pandemic, passing historic legislation, pulling the NATO alliance together, blah, blah, blah. And part of the reason he doesn't is performative. He looks his age and isn't as agile in front of a camera as he once was. And this is fed a narrative about competence that isn't rooted in reality. So there's a lot going on there in that quote. First of all, I mean, he's trying to give the most favorable narrative for Biden possible. But even within that extremely favorable narrative, he admits that, you know, there's a performance issue here. But I just think, I don't know, I'm seeing all these takes lately about how, oh, he's not getting the credit he deserves and voters just don't understand. And why don't they care about the things they're supposed to care about, like January 6th? And it's like, listen, maybe the problem isn't their messaging or isn't their like not getting the credit they deserve. Maybe the problem is that they're actually not delivering for people. Maybe that's the issue, is the substance, not the messaging or the sloganeering.
Shocking. And look, on Biden's age, you know, Nate Silver put this out. I think journalists and political elites are, for the most part, too polite about discussing the age of candidates. It is quite reasonable for voters to be concerned about someone in their late 70s or older, given the demands of the job. Look, Biden would be 86 years old at the end of his second term.
Oh my God.
That's crazy town. Like, I had dinner before the election with a guy who was 78, and he looked at me and he was like, I'm 78 years old. He's like, I am at the twilight of my life. He's like, the idea that I could assume the most stressful position in the free world and do it competently every day, he told me this quote, is batshit crazy. He's being self-aware. And listen, I'm not saying that some old people can't do the job. It's obviously very hit or miss once you start to push like 75. But it's crazy to me that the senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, is in open decline and clearly has dementia.
Sad.
And look,
it's really sad.
It's not just sad because that assumes that it's all about her. I'm sorry, this is public service. Like, the idea that 40 million people are not having their interests adequately represented on Capitol Hill is frankly bullshit. Like, you cannot hold that position when you're 90-something years old and you can't remember people's names. You just can't do it. We would never, if you were the CEO of a publicly traded company, which is far less of an important job, the board of directors would say, we thank you for your service, but you got to move on in the interest of shareholders. We're all shareholders in the U.S. government, and yet we are not allowed to speak as openly about this. The fact that the president would be 80-something years old when he's running already for re-election, that's nuts. I mean, it's just frankly nuts. Now, look, we may be judging it against Trump, who is himself obese and also nearly 80 years old.
So old, yeah.
You know, look, that would certainly be a consideration, but we have to talk about it.
Right.
We have to.
And that gets to the crux of the problem here, because it's like, well, okay, that's definitely an issue, but then who's your alternative? And, you know, for Democrats, that's really the problem. I don't think there's any illusions now about how the Biden presidency is going.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist to look at the numbers and say, this is not working out well. And he clearly is, you know, partially in hiding. I mean, he does many fewer interviews than other presidents have done.
He does with Jimmy Kimmel.
Right.
Like,
he's very, I mean, he's very inaccessible. We just don't see that much of him. And that's clearly because, you know, when he does make comments, oftentimes he says something that then his aides are having to clean up and they're very uncomfortable with his performance. It's just very clear that it's halting and not commanding presence at this point. But then you're like, okay, so then Kamala Harris? No, that's worse. Like, I would vote for, if my choices were 86-year-old Biden or however old Kamala Harris is, I would definitely pick 86-year-old Biden, right? If my choices are 86-year-old Biden and 80-year-old Trump, I'm picking 86-year-old Biden. I mean, so that's the problem that you end up with is, like, you know, we have a political class that is disgustingly hollow and vapid and motivated by all the wrong things. They're not sending their best, as you might say. And so that's kind of the logic that they're locked into is, like, you know, they might engage in these fantasies of, oh, what if we replaced him with, I know the one they would really like is Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, right.
But they don't really know how to pull that off. And so I don't know. I really don't know how it's all going to play out. I think Biden is truly committed to running for another term. I think if he is at all, like, capable of formulating a sentence, I think they're going to prop him up, because I do think, you know, they're not going to be able to figure out a way to hopscotch over Kamala. I personally don't think that Pete would be particularly better electorally, and certainly I don't think he would be better in terms of actual governance than Biden. So, yeah, they're kind of stuck. They may know that they're screwed, but they're still kind of stuck. Yeah,
I've been toying with this idea in my head about a prisoner's dilemma for both parties, which is that Joe Biden is a Democrat and he's historically unpopular. He would almost be beaten by any generic Republican in 2024. But no generic Republican can beat Donald Trump in a primary for the GOP. Also, only Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump in a general election. So it's like one of those things where, yeah, Biden is the very historically unpopular Democrat, and any generic R could beat him, but that person could never beat Trump. And then the only Dem that I see on the national scale that even has a chance against Trump is probably Joe Biden. So you really get yourself stuck in a bad situation. It's exactly the choice that we face in 2020. It's extraordinarily likely that's going to be the choice that we face in 2024. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, they really boxed themselves in with Kamala. You know, I'm reading that book, This Will Not Pass, and, like, the delusion within these people, the idea that Kamala was going to add something to the ticket is insane. And really, they just got boxed in by identity politics.
They did.
They got, you know, Jim Clyburn and Al Sharpton and all these people were like, you got to pick a black woman. And it's like, okay, well, when you pick somebody solely based upon their identity versus their actual political skill and what actual black people want, well, I don't know. You know, that's how you end up in this situation. Kamala and Pete are the future, and I don't think any of them would even crack like 47% of the vote nationally.
Yeah, no, it's a dire situation for the Dems. It really, really is. And I think the flip side, you know, they tried to make this case in the article, obviously, I'm not buying this, which is to tell you what the other side of the story is like, people, Obama's approval ratings were bad going into 2010. He got shellacked in the midterm, so this is just a lot of hand-wringing. But there was not this level of angst among Democrats about Obama. No. I mean, it was, yes, I actually ran for Congress in the 2010 midterm, so I can tell you it was ugly for Democrats, no doubt about it. But Obama was always, and continues to be, extremely popular with Democrats.
He was a great politician. And I mean that in his own right.
Right. He was skilled. There was no one musing about the fact that he can't handle an interview and he's got a presentation problem. No, there was definitely none of that going on. And so this is decidedly different. I remember Bernie kind of sort of flirted with maybe running against Obama, and there was just no appetite for that whatsoever. So to have a sitting incumbent president subject to this level of rumors and angst about whether the incumbent president, who has a massive advantage in terms of re-election, is the right candidate to put up next time around, that really is extraordinary. I mean, Trump, despite how disastrous he was on almost every level, there was never any speculation about whether he was going to run again. I mean, he filed for re-elect right away, but there was never any Republican hand-wringing about, I don't know, this guy's really on, this may not be the right guy for the next go-round. No. To have a sitting incumbent president and you're not sure this is the right one to move forward with, that's pretty unusual.
I completely agree.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.